Hello and welcome to the In the Money Players podcast. This is our show for Monday, June 12th. I'm your host, Peter Thomas Fornatal, back in the Brooklyn bunker once again, and very happy to get a chance to look back at a loaded last weekend of racing, Belmont Stakes Racing Festival, with two of my favorite folks to chat racing with, and the two most common people you see on these shows other than myself. We'll start with the man up in one corner who's been doing recapping for us for quite a long time. And you can also find his work over at inthemoneypodcast.com. And you hear him behind the mic at Sam Houston. That's actually a story we need to tell about Peter Luger's in a pretty fine act of degeneracy the other night. I'm speaking, of course, of Nick Tammaro. Nick, how are things?
Doing great, Pete. Back home from the Belmont. It was a good time in one piece, and a bit better shape than our other co-host who ran us through his trials and tribulations.
I have to start with the falling on the sword. As soon as I said the words, JK, and all the time I've known you, you never get sick. You have a kid the same age as me, and yet you avoid it. You're a miracle, man. You're a medical marvel. As soon as I said it, I said, there's a possibility I just jinxed him, and I'm going to feel really bad if that happened. We will bring him in right now from Fox Sports, Jonathan Kinchin.
Yeah, you got me. Yes. I'm going to blame it mostly on you, but I take a little bit of responsibility. Joe Vanina wasn't well. Every member of her family since we got back from Italy, and a bunch of our friends, ear infections, headaches, worst fever ever, been sick. I think Sean Borman got sick. Everyone I know got sick coming back just because, we went pretty hard. But I made fun of her. I was like, I'm a cockroach. Like, I never get you can't kill me. I can't ever get sick. And so I'm a little bit responsible for it. But yeah, I woke up Friday morning. I was not well. Stomach sick too, which I have a huge fear of throwing up. So I've never allowed myself to really get stomach sick. Even when I'm stomach sick, I just kind of power through it. But this was the first time I've thrown up non-alcohol induced in 20 years. So I was not well Friday. Then I rallied on Saturday, drank too much Saturday night, got re-sick again yesterday, but I'm back. I'm feeling good, and I'm alive, so that's good.
Harkening back to Seinfeld and the multi-year vomit streak that Jerry had on that program. We're not doing a media recap show, but I do want to know how your experience was being on Big Fox and working with our man Chris Felica over there.
Yeah, it was cool. Like, I think for most of the people that were at the track, they didn't really know or understand there was two broadcasts. Like we talked about it like simultaneously. There was the FS1 and then the Fox Sports one. I was on the FS1 show a majority of the day, but then I did pop over for one hit before the Met Mile with Chris Felica and Carissa Thompson, and it was fun. I was only on for like 3 minutes, but it was cool. And I didn't really get a chance to watch the rest of the Fox broadcast. I heard it looked really good. I heard there, we had a lot of cool angles and cameras and even in rehearsals on Friday, there was like a rehearsal that we just kind of went over what we were going to talk about. But leading up to it, I listened in my ear on the IFB, listened to Durkin call the Rotney race. Was that how you said that? What you're saying? Rotney, Rotknee. He was calling the Rotney race, but he was doing it kind of just like he wasn't, it was just for our ears, for him to get a practice run. And I like teared up just like hearing his voice calling a race. So that was fun. But yeah, it was cool. It's fun to be a part of these big broadcasts, and and kudos to Fox for really kind of ponying up to support racing. They've really leaned into their role in racing, and you've seen that with their commitment to the Belmont Stakes. And this was their first one. I'm sure they learned a lot about the facility and a lot about the race and all that stuff. And I'm optimistic that it will only continue to improve.
We'll get to these races in a second, but I do just want to share, we didn't have Durkin in where we were, and I was having a chat with my friend Mary Odious, and she was extremely excited having Durkin back on the mic. And I asked, "How is he doing? Is he showing any ring rust? What's going on?" And she just said, "Nobody calls a race like the Dirk." And I love that.
You know what? Someone told me this too. I didn't, and we can talk about it really quick. So I heard people were like kind of teasing him about his Met Mile call, because I actually heard it because it was in my ear. I don't even know if you guys have even heard it yet.
I haven't heard it.
Have you heard it, Nick?
I have, yeah.
So so I guess what they're making fun of is the fact that he said that Cody's wish is toiling at the back. But like that's what Durkin does. Like that's why he's great. Just because he or we know that Cody's Wish was kind of going backwards to then go forward, that doesn't matter. That's the story. You tell the story of the 1-5 shot with the unbelievably emotional story behind it with the child and all of this stuff.
Yeah,
you tell the story that Cody's Wish is toiling at the back. And then he makes the run, and the people who know shit about horse racing could not be more engaged. They're crying. We're all crying. Like who? That's what he does. That's the story he tells. And he was, for a second and a half, he was toiling at the back.
I never thought he was not traveling personally, but I take your point about the narrative. And Nick, as a race caller, what did you think of that?
The single hardest thing in calling a race is making predictive statements, right? And so the announcers over time that have been particularly good at analyzing where a horse is and where they're going, it's such an art, right? It's so hard to do because you're looking through binoculars. And even and at a place like Belmont, where you need a specifically strong set of binoculars, you're making a declarative statement about something that really is just sort of anticipatory. And I mean, I think personally that, and I am in no position whatsoever to ever criticize or critique Tom Durkin ever. I think he probably would want to take back the word toiling, but the point he was making is that Cody's Wish was last, right? And that's indisputable. I don't know, I think he would have said, he used that word very effectively throughout his career. I think he probably would have said, in watching it back, I would have rather it been a horse that looked like they were last and going nowhere. But the thing is, that horse made such a fast move from that point to the quarter pole that it surprised everybody. Right? I mean, it surprised me. It probably surprised both of you. It undoubtedly surprised Tom. He went from inside and last to widest and grabbing the lead in like a furlong. And so, for a guy that hadn't called a race in 9 years and was doing this at 72 years old, I mean, it was incredible. It's incredible to see. I mean, all of us would have given anything we had to see, vintage Michael Jordan one time on the court with LeBron, or something like that. And this was kind of our opportunity to do it from a race calling perspective. And, the thing is with Tom, the expectation's always so high because so many of the races that he called so well over the years are so popular because of him, right? The races themselves were great, but Tisnow is more popular because of him in both Breeders' Cups. And, the Smarty Jones Belmont is heartbreaking. And you watch the replay every time, hoping that he's somehow going to win, but that he's going to lose, and Durkin is going to capture it so perfectly. And, it was great to have that back. I mean, for Fox, it was brilliant because if you're going to make a splash, in terms of bringing somebody back, I mean, I'll put it to you this way. If CBS somehow got the contract to cover the national championship game next year, I mean, wouldn't they love to have I mean, Keith Jackson's not with us anymore, but wouldn't they love to have somebody like that, or some classic voice that we grew to love over the years? Of course. I mean, there's no question about it.
One thing, just to piggyback on your point, and then we'll actually start with the Met Mile since we're talking Cody's Wish and we're talking about that race call. But Jerry Bailey's own memory of riding Cigar to victory in the Classic, when he tells the story, he's consistently quoting the Durkin call. Like, how amazing is that? It's not like he even heard it during it, but he captured it so well that it's almost like more impactful than the own memories of the man in the saddle. Like, that is the power of media and the power of Tom Durkin.
Yeah, and just quickly,
go ahead, Jonathan.
Like there's some the first time I ever walked into Churchill Downs, I saw Rachel Alexandra run in the Oaks. The first time I ever stepped foot on those grounds, and when I close my eyes and I think about that race, I see her running by me in real time. I can see her running by me in real time, but the only audio I hear is Tom's call. That's the only audio I can hear when I look at that.
You bet.
Yeah,
that was it. Did you have one more point on the call or Durkin, Nick, before we dive into the Met Mile?
No, I mean, his theater background was always what made it so that he could deliver those lines as if they were just coming into his head, and when you hear an announcer rattle off some pre-rehearsed cheeseball lines, they come off like pre-rehearsed cheeseball lines, right? And Durkin may have known exactly what he was going to say for Cigar, but boy, it sounded like he came up with it at the eighth pole. It sounded like he had no doubt what he was going to say, and it was delivered flawlessly.
I hope he's doing the museum visits again in Saratoga, doing those tours. That's like the best value activity to take a look at, and ties in some great causes. So talking about this, and you mentioning the theater background, Nick, is making me think how much money I'd pay for a Tom Durkin one-man show. But it's on to Cody's Wish, the real protagonist of the drama in the Met Mile. And yeah, I would say this was arresting, visually arresting, even by his own standards, his own lofty standards, as he made that scintillating move and gets up, wins by 3+ in the end. The figure makers love this run. Came back 129 with the time form adjusted. I think the buyer 112, Nick? 109?
112, yeah.
112. I mean, we all knew this horse was great. And no. Let me rephrase that. We all knew this horse was very, very good. We all knew this story was great. But I feel like we're at a point glimpsing now the potential for Cody's Wish and the rest of this season, and saying, this horse might be greater than we even thought. We really might be looking at something special, because let's just say he wins the Whitney, goes on to win a race like the Breeders' Cup Classic. This would be, you would suddenly be in the kind of territory, winning a grade 1 from 7 furlongs to 10. You're talking about things that, it's a real short list of horses who've done it. Flightline, Go Zapper, Dr. Fager, maybe. I don't know if I can name another. I'm starting to think that this horse might even be better than we thought he was. How good or how great is Cody's Wish? We'll start with you, Jonathan.
I mean, he's on his way, right? I mean, I think he's a foregone conclusion. I'm not worried about the distance at all for him in the Whitney, right? Barring any racing luck in that race, he's the winner of the Whitney. I've talked about it a lot with Gary Stevens and with Richie Migliori, and they've convinced me fully that a 1-turn mile is more of a distance challenge for horses than 2-turn mile and an eighth, because they don't get to slow down going into that first turn. They're running on the backside the entire way, and it's not, there's no time to slow down. And I even think even more so at Belmont, because you don't even have to really slow down on the turn. You're basically running in a straight the entire time. You get lost out there. The turns are so sweeping. So I think that if he goes on to win the Whitney, then it's just, what do you do next with him? Because now that jump to the 1.25 miles, which seems like it would have to be what he does next, becomes kind of the sneaky part. And I think that he'll absolutely do that. If anyone thinks that this horse is going to run in the Breeders' Cup Dirt Mile, you have lost your mind. You have never seen Maidan. You've never seen Emirates Airlines. There is no way in hell that this horse came back to run in the Dirt Mile again. He will run in the Classic. I think even barring if he wins the Whitney and he runs second in a 1.25 mile race, I still think he shows up in the Classic, and then he'll have an opportunity to kind of stamp himself with that great tag. And I love the way that he does it with his style. I think that makes it even more exciting and even more impressive. Like, he's not just some speedball horse that's just better than everyone else. He comes from out of it, and he is better than everyone else.
Nick, how about you? You sometimes like to rain on the parade of the sentimental story, though you've always been a known Cody's Wish fan at the same time. Does it sound crazy that we could be talking about the Breeders' Cup Classic winner?
Oh, no. That should be the prime part of the conversation right now. I mean, and as Jonathan's alluding to, it's sort of, that's got to be the reason they brought him back, right? I mean, he could have been a stallion last year, but being a Curlin and having all that ability, you wanted to see really how much he could be tested moving forward. The only problem I could see, and trying to look at this as objectively as possible, it's been made abundantly clear that everybody that he's faced around one turn, he is much better than. I mean, not just somewhat better than, he's much better than them. The only problem is I foresee it, and this thought process is requiring something that really doesn't exist right now. He could be vulnerable in a slower paced 2-turn race. And the only reason I say that is because he can't drop 6 or 7 lengths out and make that, that split second move to get back into contention in a race like the Whitney. But can you let me know who the quality speed horses are in that division? Because, I mean, I don't know who exactly could run away from him to give him potentially a big problem. And, the Foster will bear out a lot in terms of what kind of horses we could see, potentially looking at a race like the Whitney. It looks like Bob Baffert's going to keep Taba out west. I thought Taba could probably beat Cody's Wish in the Met Mile. Having watched the Met Mile, I don't think there's a chance in hell that Taba would have beaten him. I think it would have taken a race that we've just not seen from Taba yet. And the thing is about Cody's Wish as well is that he's in it the hands of a guy who's you really trust. Stretching, getting more ground out of horses, doing things that are a little bit what some would consider to be on the tougher side. And I think Belmont knows this is a horse with just a world of ability. I'd encourage people that haven't seen it to go back and watch his 1 1/8 maiden race in his second career start. He got about as ridiculous a trip as you could find. He had no problem getting the distance. It just seemed at that point like he probably was a little bit better going shorter. And the thing is, he is better going shorter, but that doesn't mean that he's just not a significantly better horse than he was back in that time. And he's going to continue to move forward, because one thing about that horse is that he seemingly has gotten better with each passing start. So I envision he's going to be very tough in the Whitney. And, I hope we get a Healthy Smile Happy and, one of the Brad Cox horses, and even Rattle and Roll in the Whitney, and all those horses that, would really make it a fun race. It's supposed to be the marquee handicap race of the year.
It's also notable to me, looking at Cody's Wish, that some of his being so far back is a bit circumstantial. It's not like he's some plotter. You look at his pace figures as they go farther out to 1.25 miles, maybe even, it's going to be a lot closer, I would think.
Exactly. Right. He's going to be 2 or 3 lengths off the lead. And the fact that he can lengthen his stride and get into contention so quickly, I mean, that augurs well for his ability to get a good kind of stalking trip going along.
Very exciting stuff with Cody's Wish, and a story that just keeps on giving. Let's talk about the Belmont Stakes for a minute, gentlemen. Arcangelo getting the job done at 7-1. Obviously, amazing story that racing could really use, with having the first female trainer to win a Triple Crown race. This is a horse, Nick, you've mentioned as a Belmont Stakes winner before the Peter Pan, and it was great to see the plan come to fruition here. Sort of an unusually run race, I want to say, more tactical maybe than some. I thought the Castellano's ride certainly deserves some discussion. Nick, we'll start with you on your thoughts on Arcangelo's win in the big one on Saturday.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned, from a general racing perspective and from a fan standpoint, Jenna Antonucci winning is a great story. And while we're collecting negative headlines as a sport, this is a positive one, especially because, I mean, Jenna Antonucci, with all due respect, she's not like Linda Rice or Brittany Russell or anybody like that has a ton of horses and is winning a ton of races. I mean, she's a small-time trainer. But it just goes to show you that a good horse can win for any trainer that that knows what they're doing. And pretty much, if you're running at this level, you know what you're doing. So that part was great, and the confidence shown by the ownership in putting up supplemental money to get him into the race. Javier Castellano, who very quietly has ridden amazingly well over the last year or so, and I didn't really see anybody pick up on it. But a lot of credit to be given to his agent, PJ Campo, the former director of racing at Naira, who has gotten him on nothing but live horses left and right, and has also done a very good job with Eric Cancel. I think he deserves a lot of credit because I think Javier is a guy who has always ridden well when he has confidence. And when he's winning, he has much more confidence. He still is plenty capable. I didn't necessarily think that keeping him on the rail was the greatest idea through the first 8 furlongs or so of the race, but he overcame it because the inside to me did not look like it was necessarily bad, but they were deliberately avoiding the inside throughout the day, whereas on Friday, I felt like being inside may have actually been a little bit more of an advantage. The pace was fast. I was surprised that it was as quick as it was. I know Time from US kind of predicted it would be quick. It led to the last quarter being kind of a stagger fest, which, the Belmont is often that case. And so Arcangelo was in the right place at the right time. He had the right move at the right time. And I think as far as the winner goes, that's probably about all you'd have to say.
Yeah. 8% overall for the career, Jenna Antonucci. Just, very, not terrible numbers, not numbers that stand out, but somebody who obviously hasn't had too much talent like this Blue Rose Farm runner in her barn to this point. I definitely want to pick up on the ride. I thought it was interesting. I'm good. In the middle of the race, there's a minute there where it looks like Castellano's maybe looking to get off the rail, and he ends up in between horses. And then at one point, he makes this decisive move down at the rail. What did you think, JK, as that was going on? Was that a, what are you doing? Or was that a, let's see how this works out? Or was that a, go on, my son?
No. I mean, it's funny. I mean, I think that there's all of those are possible correct answers depending on what your wager was. I didn't have Arcangelo, so the entire time I was screaming, Johnny, shut him off. Johnny, shut him off. Johnny, don't let him. Johnny, shut him off. That's what I was screaming. because it worked out to be a perfect trip. I mean, that's what you want in a situation like this. When Nick mentioned it's a Staggerfest home, every inch matters, and Javier gained those inches. While Forte and Tappet Trice and the others were, middle moving, circling wide on the turn, Javier was sitting in there chilly. I'm not saying that was necessarily the difference, but man, it would have been a hell of a closer call if the trips were switched, right? I had this weird thing with Arcangelo. This is really ridiculous, but I'm just going to be honest. We're all guilty of kind of creating these ideas and these feelings about horses, and then we can't let them go sometimes. I call it the cookie, letting go of the cookie. An old coach of mine used to teach me about these monkeys in Africa they used to try to catch, and they would put Oreos in a hole, and the monkeys would put their hands in, grab the Oreo, and if they hold on to the Oreo, they can't get their hand out. That's how they would trap them. If they would just let go of it, they could get their hand out, but they won't let go of the cookie. That's what I did with Arcangelo. On March 18th, he ran in a race down in South Florida, and I bet a horse behind him in that race who ran horrible. I think the horse's name was Magical Power, and I never forgave Arcangelo's figure for that race. And so I always just kind of thought, I don't love this horse. I don't love Arcangelo. Is he really that good? Is he really that good? Then we talked about it, Pete, on the show we did when he ran in the Peter Pan against Bishop's Bay. I called John Panagot. I was a little bit annoyed at Florent's ride on Bishop's Bay. And Johnny said, no, that was the instructions not to make the lead too early on Bishop's Bay because he pulls himself up. So then I thought to myself, the only reason Arcangelo beat him was because he made the lead Bishop's Bay and he pulled himself up. So I basically made two poor assessments of his last two races. So it allowed me to just not really give him a ton of credit. So it's 100% what happened. I just completely I wouldn't let go of the cookie of those previous situations, and it ended up kind of biting me.
He moved up again. Arcangelo did. The figure with the buyer about 102 for this race. Does that sound right, Nick?
It was 102. Yeah.
Yeah. So he moved up again, going farther. It's not like anybody was relishing the distance, right? I mean, the last quarter was 26 seconds plus. I think you guys both called it a stagger fest. That's about right. It felt to me that Castellano won the race with the definitive move in the middle. And, you had a horse like Forte who was off the bridle a long way out, and you picked up again. But some of his late closing move, I think, was him just getting less tired than some of the other horses.
Yeah, it was a class thing. I think we found that out about Forte. I'm not sure how good he is, but he's really classy. If that makes any sense, I think that his class can kind of help him maybe outrun his ability from time to time. I think that's kind of what that was. One question I want to ask you both. I'll start with you first, Nick. Who was the horse that you're mad at yourself that you thought had a chance that ran poorly? Because I have one that I feel like I fell for, and I'm a little bit agitated that I fell for it because I know better.
So I bet Arcangelo, Tappet Trice, and Hit Show. So, I mean, I don't think that any of those necessarily ran poorly. I'm mad at myself for buying all of the Todd wins every Belmont hype and just assuming that Tappet Trice was that good. The problem for me was I was never getting Forte in the exacta. I was a total toss of Forte. So I guess I'm mad. That's probably my worst opinion that I'm mad about. But I didn't have a horse that I thought would run well that didn't, if that makes sense. I think I probably thought Hit Show was better than he actually is. And when push comes to shove, he's a horse that's just capable of running, mid 90s to maybe upper 90s buyer figures. But he was always going to struggle in that scenario, given how grindy he is and that he really can't accelerate.
Pete, anybody that you kind of any regret? Any Belmont regret?
I actually feel like I was pretty darn close with this one. Maybe, because here's the thing, I kind of want to say I gave Tappet Trice too much credit, but I didn't. I don't think I did because he was 5-1. We were, when I was thinking about being anti him, it was thinking he was going to be, there was so much chat about him. It sounded like he could be a 5-2, 3-1 shot. At 5-1, I feel all right with it. He's quirky, man. There, a lot of horses don't like kickback, but this horse, he really seems to resent being in behind horses, and he's very talented, but I think it's always tough with him. It's going to always be tough with him in these big full fields unless they figure something out and can bring him forward and get him to be a little more, I don't want to say honest, because it's not like it's some, I guess it is though. For a racehorse, it is a character flaw, So that's That's one thing.
Just pay a groom to stand there all day and just throw dirt at him until he gets used to it.
Who's yours, JK? National Treasure?
No, Angel of Empire. I fell for that stupid move, and you know what's funny is I realized it talking through it on the broadcast. I realized in the middle of the broadcast that my use of Angel of Empire was a mistake, but the tickets were already in. I already had them. I don't think I would have used Arcangelo instead, so it doesn't really it wouldn't have saved me by any means. But one of my greatest, and this is before I even kind of knew what I was doing, one of my greatest handicapping accomplishments was the Drosselmeyer Belmont when I tossed Icebox, and I was alive in that big pick 4 when the pick 4s were paying more than my salary as a teacher. And I tossed Icebox because I learned that closers in the Derby that are closing into meltdowns, they look like they're going to run good in the Belmont. They don't run good in the Belmont. They closed into meltdowns, and I completely fell for it with Angel of Empire. I'm not saying he's a bad horse. I'm just saying he closed into a meltdown.
Yeah.
And
Belmont, but
and I used him as an A horse, and I just wasted a lot of equity there. Not that, like I said, it wouldn't have made a difference, but I wasted a lot of equity there.
I think it's always smart to go back and look at these things. So you guys have already both sort of made some comments about Forte. I think he's worth pausing on because I think he's an interesting horse in terms of trip handicapping. Just looking around online, a lot of people are giving him extra credit for his trip. And I think, tell me if I'm wrong, but I think some of his not good trips in these last 2 runs are because he's not fast enough and he gets outpaced. And then he's so good and so classy, like you were saying, Jonathan, that he's able to overcome and put in a run. But like a truly great horse doesn't get in these spots because he's faster and able to hit holes and able to keep up and able to do some of the things that we haven't seen from Forte in these last 2 starts. Now, that does not to say that he can't continue to improve and get better, or that certain race shapes are going to suit him more. Maybe a slowly run 10 furlongs, Forte is going to look like a monster. But it just seems when we've seen these mid-race accelerations from some of his opponents the last 2 days, he gets a little bit lost before he can get going. And I think it's kind of he's a different kind of horse than a lot of what we're used to. And it's hard to balance his talent with what might be his propensity to seem like he's getting bad trips. Nick, what did you think of Forte's trip?
So he seems to have a problem cornering, which I noticed somebody say that. I kind of thought something similar in the Florida Derby because he really didn't accelerate on the turn. And the thing is, it's funny when you juxtapose him and Mage and you look at all their career starts. Mage, maybe because he's a little bit smaller, he's a hellcat on the turns. He can really take the turns fast. And I mean, when you think about it from a purely physical standpoint, you're talking about a horse essentially running at an angle. So Forte does not corner well. I mean, and I wouldn't have given you a plug nickel for Forte at the 3/8 pole. And then here he was rallying arguably best of all down the stretch when they straightened away. And it kind of reminded you of the Florida Derby when he got going once he straightened away. One of the concerns that you and I had after the Florida Derby was that he did not have any tactical speed anymore. And he did show a little bit more tactical speed on Saturday. You know, do you think that Irad would have rather had Javier's position? Yeah, I think probably. I mean, he probably would have rather been latched on to National Treasure and just been able to accelerate before everybody got to him. But he's just not that quick anymore. And for a horse that, that broke his maiden at 5/8 at Belmont and had a lot of speed as a 2-year-old, he's just not quick to the punch. I don't know if maybe there's something there that could be done equipment-wise. Maybe blinkers are going to put him in the game a little bit more. Maybe they're going to keep him from losing ground a little bit on the turns. But either way, they're not quite getting to – they've not unlocked Forte, in my opinion. And if they have, then we know what he is, and there's going to be plenty of horses in the crop to end up being better.
Your thoughts on Forte, Jonathan?
Yeah, I mean, just one of those horses. Every time you look up, he's in between horses.
Yeah.
And every time you look up, he's in between horses. And, that's not where Todd Pletcher's horses run. They don't run in between horses. They run outside of horses, sitting off of them, in the 2 or the 3 path. I do think he's interesting, though. He continuously shows up. I talked about that class thing, and he's got a Hall of Famer in Todd Pletcher who's got some time to figure him out. He's going to get a little bit of a break, I would imagine. I'm sure we'll see him in the Jim Dandy. And I wouldn't be shocked even a little bit if this horse goes on to win the Travers. I don't know. You give me the right price on him, I'd probably take it now, right? I mean, it'd have to be a no run or no bet situation. I'd probably need 6, 7, 8 to 1, 5, 6, 7, 8. But I think that this horse makes sense. I think he'll continue to progress if, like Nick said, if Todd can kind of right the ship a little bit. Not that it's wrong, but it just ain't right yet. You know what I mean?
I think we're in very much agreement. See, my theory is if such a thing as a Travers Future book existed, I think he'd be a heavy favorite. And if he comes back as a heavy favorite, he might be one I'm looking to oppose a little bit, because I think the hype and he's got so much raw talent, but I think the hype might exceed what can be expected on the track and what clearly seems now to be as open a 3-year-old division as I can remember. Who from the Belmont, let's talk a little more about the Belmont before we start reflecting on the division as a whole. Anybody from the Belmont that you're particularly interested in betting back, Jonathan?
Not really. I mean, I don't know. I think Hit Show showed a lot of talent, so maybe we'll see what kind of happens with him. Tappet Trice maybe grows up a little bit, figures it out. He's got some talent, but he just never really seemed to put it together. No, I mean, there's no one in here I'm really like cutting in line to bet 3-year-old champion on.
Yeah, I mean,
but there's really no one in the division, to be honest. Like, to answer your full question, like, I think Mage is really good. I think he had a circumstantial win. I think National Treasure is nice horse, circumstantial win. Arcangelo, nice horse, circumstantial win. Like, I mean, I don't, National Treasure wasn't going to win the Derby. He didn't win this one. Arcangelo wasn't going to win the Derby. I don't think he didn't, I just, none of the three really grabbed me as superstars.
What about you, Nick? Who's your horse to take out of the Belmont?
I mean, look, it may seem basic, but I think Arcangelo is the horse you want to take out of there because he still has the most upside. He's still very lightly raced. He's still a horse that we might get a real improvement from. I think we know who Forte is. We know who Tappet Trice is. I shouldn't necessarily lump Forte and Tappet Trice together. I think we know Tappet Trice a little bit more so than we know Forte. I don't want to completely crap all over National Treasure. But I would like to think, I guess this will go into our next segment as far as overall division. But from the Belmont, I mean, I would happily take Arcangelo. I think Brad will go the Brad route with horses like Angel of Empire and Hit Show, and they'll get softer competition. I imagine Angel of Empire will get to the Travers, but I could see Brad doing like a West Virginia route or something. He loves races where he's 3 to 5, and Angel of Empire is not going to be 3 to 5 in the Jim Dandy. He deserves to be in those kind of races, though. So, I think the most unexposed is Arcangelo. He'd be the one I'd be most inclined to take if you were telling me I had to take one.
Yeah, I don't disagree. Now, what do we know? I totally agree. Forte, Jim Dandy feels like that's going to happen. Do we have any information? It doesn't look like it, just looking at the stakes probables type sites, that there's much commitment yet. But, is there a particular horse in this division you like for a particular race? Is Mage might be the best place to start as our Derby winner. Is he meant to reappear in the Haskell? Is that what we're thinking?
I hadn't heard. Only thing I heard Haskell was maybe Arabian Lion if they decide to try one more time at 1 1/8, because they can always cut back for the Jerkins if that doesn't work out.
And why wouldn't you, right? I mean, Arabian Lion definitely deserves some chatter on the show as a horse that, just looking at speed figures, could be one who makes a major impact in this division. What did this? I'm looking up this figure now. One of you save me if you have it offhand for Arabian Lion.
109.
Yeah, I mean, the 109 in the Stevens, that's a testing 7 furlongs. I would say if you get 7 furlongs around Belmont, not unlikely you're going to get 9 at the Jersey Shore. And Baffert's won that race, 76 times? So it's that feels like a very, very good guess. Gosh, I want to see First Mission again. What are we hearing about him? Is he how serious was his setback? Pretty serious, Nick?
Yes, he's getting 60 days off. So I think he's a 2024 horse. I think this division could have an Arabian problem in the sense that Arabian Lion could run in the Haskell, and Arabian Night's 3 works in. And people have probably almost completely forgotten about Arabian Night, but that Southwest, granted it was against weak competition, but he got a 97 fix second time out. So, this is a really, really talented horse. You'd like to think maybe a low Sal Derby Travers type of situation is not impossible. He's going to need 3 more works, though, at least. So I can tell you what the guy whose barn he comes from, I would trust in that scenario. And that's a very fast horse in a crop that lacks a lot of real speed. The best speed horse we saw in the Triple Crown was arguably National Treasure, and I don't think they're going to duel each other into the ground. So yeah, he's one that I'd keep an eye on. I love the idea of Arabian Lion going to the Haskell. Two Phils is supposed to go there after they find some meaningless race in the Midwest to run in and skip everything else that really matters. Maybe they can try like the Indiana Derby or the Iowa Derby or something on the way to the Travers. But I guess he's going to run in the Ohio Derby, which, I mean, that just screams like marquee 3-year-old race. But before I rant, so him, he'd be interesting. Obviously, I think Two Phil's Derby performance, certainly, nothing that happened in the two subsequent races makes you say it was fluky. So yeah, you get all those horses healthy. I'm having a big problem with my new AirPods staying in my ear. It must be my head. So yeah, if we see all those in the same place, then I mean the Travers could be outstanding. So let's hope that they all end up there healthy and we get a good matchup.
It wouldn't be the first time, Nick, you were accused of having a swollen head. We'll say that much.
It's large to begin with, right? Yeah.
I think we'll see a few different paths. What about National Treasure for a race like the Pacific Classic, where
Bob doesn't really do that with 3-year-olds though.
I know, but now with if Nick's theory's right, if he has the two, if the two Arabians are in the mix, I was just
but
trying
he's
to
got
think
a Pacific Classic horse too, though. Tave is a Pacific Classic horse, so
that's right.
I mean, I could see Bob's not been shy about. The other thing is Bob will back somebody up to the Pennsylvania Derby. So he might have the Pennsylvania Derby in mind for somebody, and he's going to get him there. And for all things considered, that might be Arabian Nights spot, right? He might be a little behind the 8 ball to make the Travers at 1.25 miles. It's just, this feels like a crop where like a West Coast, or I'm not going to say Arrogate. I don't think anybody like Arrogate is out there right now. But, one of those late season developing 3-year-olds that Bob had really could come and take this division by storm. Because, I mean, when push comes to shove, they're all like 100 buyer horses, right? They're all, they're solid. They're not bad. They're not slow, but they're not that fast. So that means he could bring a fast horse in and kind of upset things. And I don't know. I mean, it was 7/8. He had a great trip. Arabian Lion looked terrific on Saturday, in my opinion.
I thought so too. I didn't think it was
shut off. He rated too, right? Like, sitting there in the pocket like that. Like Baffert horses don't usually do that. It's like that's not their thing.
It was,
and I think Drew's Gold is damn good. I know Jimmy Chapman said that Drew's Gold was the best horse he'd had since Caller One, which I thought was ridiculous. But now I think he might be right. Right? He's a very solid horse.
I don't want this comment to be taken literally because I certainly don't think he's as good as Flightline. But there was a little bit of that element to me of seeing a horse that you might have perceived as a pure speed horse dealing with a tough field and some trouble and showing me they were better than I was rating them going in. That's as far as I'll go. And yeah, I mean, these Arabian Lion figures they're by far the best of the crop so far. So he's really a horse to keep an eye on. But it's wide open. It's very hard. It's hard to even. I guess Mage is still a significant favorite for divisional honors just because of the extra credit people give the Derby and him running a non-disgraced race in the Preakness. But yeah, I mean, we've talked about a bunch of them, and we might not even have said the name of the one that goes on to win this division if you do get a serious late developer. Any thoughts from you, Jonathan, about who the 3-year-old champ is going to be?
No, I mean, I think we gotta, like I said, the 3 that have won don't even really have a resume as of yet that you would make you feel comfortable. If we stop the season now, I think they just wouldn't give the award this year. So I think you got to see what happens with the Haskell and the Travers, right? Yeah. More importantly, the Travers. I think if any of those 3 can win the Travers also, then they're probably locked in. And then, you just got to see what happens with those other races. If anyone goes on to win any Breeders' Cup races as well, that can always be interesting. But no, I have no position yet.
These 3-year-old restricted grade 1s left and the grade 2 Jim Dandy are all going to be appointment TV for any racing fan. Let's roll through a couple of these other stakes races. I don't want to go more than another 6 minutes here if we can. Let's start with the Manhattan up to the mark. There was some question about the distance. Well, he answered it, and it was with a definitive yes, a 105 by your speed figure. Really, really, really nice grass horse. Wonder how he's going to, if he can keep that spot in the division all the way through the Breeders' Cup. But it looks like we might have a chance for the USA to win a Breeders' Cup turf based on what we saw on Saturday. At least that's what I thought. Am I overrating him, Jonathan?
The airplane's the only thing that can beat him. Someone's got to get on that transatlantic flight. It's the only horse, the only horses that can that have a chance. There's no American horse that will beat this horse. He feels, I don't want to be flippant with saying this, but he feels like he's about to be on that run that Bricks and Mortar was on, that run that Domestic Spending was kind of on for a second. He feels like one of those two.
Nick, any dissent on how much we like Up to the Mark?
No, I mean, he's been awfully good. I think it's kind of funny that on Pegasus Day, nobody's probably going to remember who won the Pegasus, but Mage broke his maiden on debut and Up to the Mark won his turf debut. Those were kind of the two performances that you'll take away from it. But no, he's gotten very, very good. I saw the Arlington Million mentioned as a next stop at Colonial in early August, which feels like it makes sense. The only thing that could be problematic for him is the mile and a half to me. Provided he stays in one piece and he can ship over. But the good thing is that I would imagine Todd's plan is Million, Joe Hirsch Turf Classic, and then Breeders' Cup. But he also mentioned the possibility of potentially cutting him back to a mile. So, and that was a bricks and mortar conversation really all the way through the month of October in 2019. So you'll still have a lot of time to sort themselves out. And, one of the things that's notable up to this point is that these Charlie Appleby horses don't all look like machines anymore. And I'm not saying that he doesn't have somebody maybe that he's pointing to the fall, but we're at least making ground a little bit now.
Interestingly about him, Nick, Rob Dove, one of the top 10 pro punters in the UK today, had sent me some stats about he's just off form generally. All the relevant numbers for him over there. So if he catches back on an upswing overall, maybe the second half of the season it would be different. But right now, I think you evaluate those horses strictly on their form, and you don't have to pump in any Appleby magic of the last few seasons. But that's a story obviously we'll be following here throughout. Got to at least name check Clairiere. Anybody else surprised she was the price she was in there?
She was a little dead on the board early on. Yeah, I was surprised. I didn't mean to jump in, but I was surprised Search Results was such a short price. Look, Search Results ran great again and is becoming one of the easiest horses to have a soft spot for because she's lost, 3 grade ones that looked like she was on her way to winning, turning for home. I've spent the last 42 minutes. Jonathan said before we started there were 3 horses that aren't going to lose again this year, and I've been trying to figure out who the third one is, and I just figured out it's Clairiere. Right? It was Up to the Mark, Cody's Wish, and Clairiere, right?
In Italian.
Oh, in Italian, right? Sure. Didn't even think about that. Yeah.
Maybe Clairiere. You know what? Clairiere can get beat because of her style. She catches the wrong group, she'll get beat. She shouldn't get beat.
She doesn't have the most Santa Anita loving style either. So that makes sense. No, in Italian is going to be exceptionally difficult to beat. I would imagine. But yeah, no, I thought Clairiere was terrific. Joelle gets a lot of flack for deservedly so, but he got her into the race a little bit earlier. It was sort of an unsightly race because Played Hard was in the 5-path the whole way. Raylu sort of ran game stonks through on the inside. She was done at the 3/8. The baton was passing, and it just didn't look all that great. But yeah, she was terrific in the end.
Unless you want to piggyback on that, Clairiere, I thought we could just quickly get your couple sentences on in Italian, JK.
No, I just think she's remarkable. She's one of those horses that has gotten really good. It's just another example of what happens when you keep them around a little bit. And thanks to Peter Brandt, and there's lots of trainers that do that. I mean, owners that do that, but Peter Brandt, he's done it a few times now, keeping these mares in training and letting us see them grow up and turn into monsters. We got to see it with Bob Edwards and Rushing Fall as well. But she reminds me a lot of Rushing Fall because she's forward and she's tactical, but she still finishes like a Chad Brown horse. And that is always dangerous. I can't wait to see, what's going to happen Breeders' Cup wise with her, because to me, she can run in kind of both of those races. She can run in the filly and mare race on that firm turf, wire a group there out there. But, I also think that she's shown enough talent that if Chad felt like she was better at a mile, she could also run in the mile against the boys.
Be very, very interesting. But I definitely, for the filly and mare turf, nearly won it last year, and it seems pretty clear that she's moved forward. Can't get out of here without talking about Caravel, who, I don't know why at this point I don't just trust her implicitly, and I get a little bit too cute. Big Invasion ran great, the horse that we like, but Caravel, just that tactical speed just gives her such an edge, and going to be fun rooting for her the rest of the season.
Yeah, shout out to the boys in maroon, Qatar Racing. She is pretty darn exceptional, but she's also just a friendly reminder to turf sprint players that speed is it's king in those races, or maybe I should call it queen in those races. But like the way that she can make her own trip, no matter where she draws from, because she pops away from the gate, she takes all of the questions out of it. And that's what you get with horses like Big Invasion, which is why I've typically been allergic to betting closers and turf sprints. But he did run extremely well, and he's got some big races. I think that could be the 1-2 finish in the Breeders' Cup turf sprint as well. I sure do wish it was down the hill.
Yeah, that is a bummer. Elite Power 102 in the True North. What kind of a course do we see being set for Elite Power the rest of the way?
Looks like Vanderbilt, Forgo. I mean, I'd predict Vanderbilt, Forgo, Vosburg, Breeders' Cup Sprint. So yeah, looks like that's where they'd go. I think if it was a Churchill Breeders' Cup, maybe they'd consider a dirt mile. But winning another sprint sort of gives you that much more. It's just, look, it's unfortunate that Lee Power's in the same barn as Cody's Wish, because he probably could have won the Met Mile as well. And maybe that means he comes back at 6 next year and has that opportunity. He's a horse that took a long time to get to the races. He's obviously very, very good. But yeah, Mott was pretty open about – he didn't commit Elite Power to the Forgo because I think he's holding the Forgo in his back pocket in case Cody's Wish doesn't run well in the Whitney. But I think Cody's Wish is going to run fine in the Whitney. I think we'll see Elite Power twice at Saratoga.
Yeah,
the one thing else – go ahead, Peter.
Oh, I was thinking maybe dirt mile as the long-term target.
Yeah, it just depends, I mean, it's weird with these big operations. Like they can kind of break the rules. You know what I mean? Like they can just do whatever the hell they want, because like it's not like this is going to cost Juddmonte their operation if they make the wrong choice with Elite Power. But I will say this about Elite Power: I just don't see him getting beat going 6 furlongs with a real pace to close into. Like I just don't see him getting beat, and you're always going to have a real pace in the Breeders' Cup Sprint. So, it just depends on what they want to do.
We are over time, but I will throw it to you guys each one more time to just say, hey, is there another performance, another story, another anything you want to talk about from this weekend before we send it home?
I got to be honest, one of the most impressive races I saw, and I know it's not that big of a deal, but it was the 13th on Saturday, where Spirit of St. Louis won first time on the turf for Chad after breaking extremely slow. That horse was supposed to be on the lead. And he missed the break and avoided the unfortunate incident with the Hennig horse, and just came rolling and opened up and won by 4. I thought that was very impressive. I think that horse will have a nice New York bred turf stakes career.
I like the sound of that. For me, an enduring memory of the weekend will be dinner at Peter Luger, where we realized quick fire there was going to be a significant carryover in the late pick 5. Quickly put in a ticket, and of course, we're out in the first leg.
That happens at dinner when you handicap dinner. I'm glad I wasn't there for that. I say, not only did I not have to go to an ATM machine.
Yeah, you saved money for that. It was an expensive dinner at Luger, not because of anything to do with Luger.
You want to hear something funny aside real quick about that? So at Peter Luger, you have to pay in cash. They don't take anything else. They don't really
Peter Luger credit card for full.
Yeah, they'll take the Peter Luger credit card. So this is, and I remember I texted you guys that I was going to be a scratch for dinner. I was powering through. I was trying my hardest to hope I could get to a place where I could. At one point, I was on air, and I had like $140 cash in my pocket. And I text Jovanina, come to the set. She comes to the set. I balled up the 140. I threw it to her. I texted her, go bet this on Money's Gold to win, because I didn't want to have to go to the ATM. I needed to make the 140 about 280, and I thought I'd be clear to have cash for dinner. But then when Money's Gold lost, I said, I'm not going to the ATM. I don't really feel very well. Like we'll just.
Oh, if Money's Gold win, you wouldn't have spun us for dinner? That's what
I still think I would have gone home. Trust me, you guys didn't want me there, because whatever I had, you didn't want.
And we definitely didn't want you there because we had Naomi Tucker sitting in your seat, and she's a lot more fun to look at than you.
It's a good trade-off.
Nick, a closing thought.
One horse I wanted to mention who kind of asserted herself in the top of the division is a Pretty Mischievous. So good to see Game win in the Acorn.
Yes. Yes,
Glad
great
to see
pick.
somebody in that division back up with a couple of Grade 1 wins. So yeah, nice to see. And I find Brendan Walsh to be exceptionally easy to root for and an excellent horseman. And I thought this was a really strong performance from her. I'm of the opinion that being towards the inside on Friday was an advantage. I don't think it was like a big gold rail or anything, but horses that saved ground seemed to overperform throughout the day, and she saved no ground, and she was wide the whole way and stayed on. So I would imagine we'll see a couple of opportunities for her at Saratoga. Maybe with an interesting 3-year-old filly like Stilla from Belmont's barn, who looks very good through her first 2 starts. So at least now the fillies are starting to show that they aren't so much of an underwhelming group.
That would have been a total host fail of me if Pretty Mischievous hadn't come up. So thank you for that, Nick. Just the last quick thing. How did you have the track on Saturday? I thought it was pretty neutral.
Yeah, it seemed fair. I don't have anybody, I'm going to go through and watch everything closely, but didn't seem like anything. Maybe if anything, it was a bit of an advantage to be a little bit off the rail, but that's customary at Belmont. That wouldn't be anything outside the norm. And, Arcangelo would tell you that it was no problem being on the rail.
Had no problem down there. All right, we're going to wrap. Tons more content coming on the network this week. Not sure exactly what's happening when, but I might do a show every single day. So keep it tuned over on the podcast side in the Money Media. If you're watching on YouTube, let us know your thought of who's going to win this 3-year-old championship. I think that's one of the key questions coming out of this weekend for sure. For Nick Tammaro, for Jonathan Kinchin, I'm Peter Thomas Fornatal. May you win all your photos.